Hello, this is Sharon from Sharon Sews, and today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable reversible half apron with raw edge applique letters. How many times during the holiday season do we joke about if we're naughty or nice? Even the little cups say, I'm on the naughty list, I'm on the nice list. This is perfect for the baking season. Make one for yourself or make one as a gift. Let's get started. Go ahead and gather your supplies. You'll want quilting cotton for the upper portion of the apron side 1, lower portion side 1, and upper portion side 2, and the lower portion side 2. You will also want coordinating fabric for the waistband and ties, and you want to make sure that it works for both sides of the apron, and thread. Together 11 pieces of coordinating or contrasting fabric for the applique letters, naughty or nice. Each piece needs to be about 3.5 inches by 5 inches. I've pulled together some fat quarters and just some scraps that I had on hand. And then decide what you want to use when you applique the letter. You can use rayon thread, you can use metallic thread, you can just use an all-purpose polyester thread, and decide on what color you want that to be. The color that you applique will determine how much that stands out on the lower portion of the apron. The letters are added to the apron using a raw edge applique technique. So you will want a paper-backed fusible web. I used Heat and Bond Light. You'll want a pencil, and then you will want your letters that you're going to trace. I do have a PDF of the letters that you can download. That link will be in the description below, or you can make your own letters. My letters are about 3.5 inches tall. Other items that you will want to complete this project include your fabric scissors, paper scissors to cut out those letters, some type of a marking device that you're going to mark on the fabric. It could be disappearing ink pen, chalk, or the Frizon pens, which disappear when you iron over them. And do test that on your fabric. And some type of a ruler, and of course an ironing board and an iron, and your sewing machine. Go ahead and cut out the pieces for the apron side A and side B. Side A upper portion will be 42 inches wide by 13 inches long. The lower portion will be 42 inches wide by 7 inches long. The pocket, and you will cut two, will be 6 1/4 by 7.5. 2 ties, 40 inches by 5 inches. 1 waistband, 26 inches by 5 inches. And then the opposite side, upper portion 42 inches by 13 inches, lower portion 42 inches by 7 inches, and again 2 pockets at 6 1/4 inches by 7.5 inches. Those measurements will be included in the description box below. Prepare the letters to be fused to the fabric. I am using Heat and Bond Light. It's a paper-backed fusible web. I cut a piece just large enough to fit that paper size of the letters. I make sure the bumpy side of that fusible web is facing down, and you will notice that the letters are backwards, and that's what you want, because when you fuse it onto the fabric it will be the correct way. And all you're going to do is simply trace those letters with your pencil. I found that using a pencil to trace out the letters works well, because you will end up cutting this out and fusing it to fabric, and the heat of the iron can actually erase some of the other markers that you may use. But you can decide what you want to use best. Trace all of the letters from the naughty and trace all of the letters from the nice. The next step is to rough cut each letter. I do like to leave just a little bit of border around each of the letters. I find that it makes it a little bit easier when I'm fusing that to the fabric. Remember, the fabric that you're going to fuse these to is going to measure about 3.5 inches by 5 inches. Fuse those letters that you just cut out to your fabric. I'm using Heat and Bond Light, and the fabric, you want to make sure the wrong side is facing up and the bumpy side of that fusible is facing down, and then you're just going to put a little bit of heat on it with no steam to adhere it to the fabric. Go ahead and do that for every single one of those letters. Again, the fabrics you choose can be scraps of fabric, or they can be coordinating fabrics to the apron. The next step is you're going to cut out those letters. That's why you want to use some type of a marker that will not erase when you use the heat of the iron to adhere it to the fabric. So you just cut it out along those lines. Don't worry about if it's not 100% accurate, because you're going to zigzag it to the apron and that little bit of inaccuracy will be covered up. Go ahead and cut out every letter of naughty and nice. Now move to your ironing board. Take the apron A lower portion, lay it right side down on your ironing board and fold it in half, and then lightly press the center. Unfold it, and then take that portion and fold it in half lengthwise and lightly press that center. What we're doing is we're marking the center because that's going to help us place the letters for naughty and nice. Repeat that step for the lower portion of apron side B. Place apron side A lower portion right side up on your ironing board. You're going to place the naughty and nice letters on that lower portion, centering using that pressed center mark as a guideline. Place the letters about 2 inches up from the bottom raw edge and about 1/2 inch apart. After you have them placed where you like them, one at a time, peel off the backing and go ahead and put it back in place, and then use your iron to fuse it. Again, you will use your manufacturer's instructions, as they might be a little bit different than what I'm using, which is Heat and Bond Light. Do that for every single letter. Just make sure they're securely in. You don't need a lot of heat and you don't need a lot of time. And we are going to stitch them in place. Once you finish side A, go ahead and do the lower portion of side B. Because there's fewer letters, place the letters 1 inch apart to just take up a little more space. When you applique your letters, decide if you want to use a metallic thread or a rayon thread or simply an all-purpose polyester thread. Set your machine for a very narrow and dense zigzag stitch. I would highly recommend practicing on scrap fabric before you do this on your apron. When you applique, you want to position your presser foot so that the left-hand swing of the needle is going to be on the applique letter, and the right-hand swing of the needle will land just outside the edge of the applique. That's what's securing it to the fabric. If you want to, you can add stabilizer to the back side of your letters. I found I did not need that, but it really depends on the fabric that you're using. So one at a time, you're going to applique your naughty or nice letters to your apron bottoms. When you get to a corner of one of the letters, stop with the needle down on the right-hand swing of the needle. Raise your presser foot and pivot your fabric and continue stitching until you get to that next corner. On this apron, I used a red metallic for the nice side, and I used a multicolor metallic for the naughty side. I did find using a metallic thread that I did need to slow down my stitching just a little bit. On the other aprons that I've sewn, I used an all-purpose polyester thread, and I did find that was just a little bit easier on the applique if you are new to this. Take your apron upper and lower portions to a flat work surface. Place one side, upper portion and lower portion, with the wrong side on the table, and then flip that lower portion over so that you're matching one long edge right sides together. If you want to pin it in place to help you when you stitch, go ahead and pin it in place now. You will end up taking that to the sewing machine and sewing that seam together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do the same thing with the opposite side, pin it in place. Now take both of the apron sides to your sewing machine. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, go ahead and stitch that seam that you just pinned together. Do it for both apron sides. Once you are done with that, you're going to take the apron to your ironing board and you're just going to simply iron that seam open. I like to press the seam flat first just to set the stitches into the fabric and then press the seam open. And of course, make sure you do that on both sides of the apron. This step, we are preparing the pockets to add to the apron. Now, if you don't want apron pockets, eliminate this step and just go on to the next one. Now, what you're going to do is take the two apron pockets, place them right sides together because this is going to create a nice lined pocket with no raw edges. Go ahead and pin the edges in place, and you're going to designate one of the shorter edges, one of the 6 1/4 inch edges, as the bottom. At the bottom, you're going to leave a 3-inch opening. That's how you're going to turn this pocket right side out. Go ahead and pin it in place, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine. Be sure to do that for both apron pockets for both sides of the apron. At the sewing machine, start at one of the openings for the 3-inch opening that you marked earlier. Be sure to backstitch and then use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and stitch all the way around all the edges. Be sure to pivot at those corners. Once you are done stitching, you will remove it from the sewing machine, and at those corners, go ahead and clip off a little diagonal piece of fabric. To be careful not to clip into the stitches that you just made. If you did, you got to go back and restitch it. Clipping those little triangles off of the corners, that's just going to eliminate some of the bulk at the corner of your pocket. Now, make sure you do it on both of your pocket pieces, and if you want to, you can also trim down that seam allowance from 1/2 inch. I found I did not need to. At this point, use that little opening on the bottom and turn your pockets right side out. Go ahead and turn in the opening at the bottom 1/2 inch and then press all of the edges with your iron. There's that little opening. That will get secured when we add that to the apron. Be sure to do it on both of your pocket pieces and then take it to the sewing machine and top stitch 1/2 inch from the upper edge. You can top stitch with coordinating thread or a contrasting thread, whatever you prefer. To add the pocket to the apron, what you're going to do is take one side of the apron, lay it flat on a work surface right side up. Measure 7 1/2 inches from the left side and 1/2 inch up from that seam that connects the upper and lower edges together. Now, if you're left-handed, you may want to put this on the opposite side of the apron, meaning you would measure 7 1/2 inches from the right side of the apron. It depends on which side you like to have your pocket on when you have an apron. And then go ahead and pin this in place. It's going to make it easier for you when you stitch it in place. Once both pockets are pinned in place on both sides of the apron, take it to your sewing machine and edge stitch 3 edges, keeping that upper edge of the pocket open. Take one apron side and place it on a flat work surface right side up. Take the other apron side and place it right side together. Go ahead and match up that little seam where the top and the bottom portions meet, and then match the raw edges of the apron. Pin it in place all the way around. Leave the upper portion unpinned. If you find that one of the edges doesn't match completely, that is okay. Just trim it off. Now you're going to take the apron to the sewing machine and you're going to sew the 3 edges using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. A tip that I like to do is measure 1/2 inch from the side seam and make a mark. As you can see there, makes it really easy for me when I'm turning those corners. And just stitch all the way around in a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And be sure to backstitch front and back to secure your stitches at the top opening. Go ahead and clip off those little triangles at the corners, just like you did on the pockets. Then you're going to take this back to your flat work surface and you're going to turn the apron right side out. Turn it right side out through that upper edge opening. Now, if you need some help getting a nice sharp corner, use a tool. I use a chopstick that I picked up at a restaurant. You could use a pencil. You could even use your scissor if you're very careful. What you don't want to do is poke through that corner, because then you got to go back and stitch it. So there, once it's turned right side out, you have both sides of your apron. And of course, we're now going back to the ironing board, because ironing is what makes everything look fabulous when it is completed. Go ahead and press those edges nice and sharp, and then bring this back to your flat work surface. Pin the upper edges of the apron together, then fold it in half, matching those side edges, and mark the center. I like to use chalk. Make it a fairly large mark so that you will see it after you gather this upper edge together. Bring the apron to your sewing machine and stitch a row of gathering stitches or long basting stitches 1/2 inch from the upper edge, leaving long thread tails at the beginning and the end. Do not backstitch for this step. And then you're going to stitch a second row of gathering stitches 1/4 inch from the upper edge, leaving those long thread tails at the beginning and the end. Fold the waistband in half, matching the side edges, and mark the width Y center. I just like to use pins. You can use a marking pen if you want to, or chalk, whatever works best for you. Once you have the center marked, go ahead and lay the waistband down on your flat work surface, right side up, and align one tie short edge with one waistband short edge and pin in place. Repeat for the other side. You're going to match one short edge of a tie to one short edge of the waistband. You will then take this to your sewing machine and you will stitch that seam in a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After you stitch the seam, you will bring it to your ironing board and press that seam open. To add the waistband and the ties to the apron, go ahead and put the apron on a flat work surface, and then position the waistband right side down over the apron and match the centers. Go ahead and pin that in place. Then you're going to align the edge of the apron with that seam between the waistband and the tie. Go ahead and pin that in place. Now you see you have more fabric on the apron than you do the waistband, so you're simply going to take those long thread tails that you have when you added those gathering stitches on the apron, and you're going to pull them up to match the length of the waistband. Pull it gently so that you don't pull your stitches out or break your stitches, because then you got to do the whole thing over and you don't want to do that. Once you have it gathered evenly and matching the length of the waistband, go ahead and pin it in place. Do the exact same thing for the other half of the apron. Once you have everything pinned in place, you're going to go to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch it in place. When you start stitching, make sure you do that back stitch to lock your stitches. Please don't sew over your pins, and just simply sew in a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which will be where your gathering stitches were. And if you're a little bit off, it's okay, because you can always remove those gathering stitches and just simply stitch all the way across the apron, attaching it to the waistband. Now you're going to take the apron to your ironing board, press that seam towards the waistband. Then you're going to take the long edges of the waistband and you're going to fold it in 1/2 inch toward the wrong side and press. You're going to continue to fold up 1/2 inch and press in place along the waistband tie. When you're done with that, at the very edge, at the short edge, press that in 1/2 inch also. Your next step is to fold the waistband in half with wrong sides together, enclosing the raw edge of the apron, and you're going to place that edge that you just pressed about 1/8 inch beyond the stitches on the apron. Pin that in place, and you're going to continue on all the way down, folding the ties in half also. Go ahead and press, because your last step is to take it to the sewing machine and edge stitch in place. You're going to edge stitch the waistband and the ties, long and short ends, all the way around all 4 edges. You could start anywhere you want to. I just like to start at the seam that attaches the waistband to the apron. Now an edge stitch is simply a straight line of stitching that you stitch close to the edge of the fabric. That's why it's called an edge stitch, usually about 1/8 of an inch. It's like a little top stitch, and here it is done. Your apron is now complete. Put it on and admire your work. And look at how different it looks choosing different fabrics. And if you don't want to put the letters on the bottom, you have a simple reversible apron. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial, and I really hope you had fun making your apron. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, do so now so you don't miss future videos. Thank you and have a blessed day. Happy sewing!